G'day, welcome to Oly35mm, user-based, quasi-empirical, cheap and cheerful videos on Olympus 35mm cameras. And the particular model that I'd like to share with you today is the Olympus OM-40, known in the US as the OM-PC. The camera came out in 1985 and only lasted about 3 years. But as far as I'm concerned, it was probably the pinnacle of the consumer cameras. It had program, like the OM2 SP had a program, and the 2 SP, as far as I'm concerned, sort of sat in that no man's land between consumer and professional cameras. But this was definitely a consumer camera, and it had quite a few features that I think were really worthwhile for serious amateurs. But there was that simplicity of first-time users as well. So 85 through to 87, 3-year run. It had program auto, and it had a selection of auto shutter speed and aperture. What you did is you set your aperture on your lens to the minimum aperture, and the program would take over. It's actually interesting. You can actually, while you're in the program mode, and I'll actually just swing that around so you can actually see it, the program mode there. You can actually change the aperture while you're in the program mode, but why you'd want to, I'm not too sure. So you've also got an aperture preferred automatic feature, program function, and also a fully manual function as well. And in the viewfinder, you have shutter speeds indicated from 1 second through to 1,000th of a second. And while you're in the manual mode, it actually suggests the shutter speed that you should actually be choosing. So while you're in the auto mode, it tells you the shutter speed that the camera will be picking when you pick the aperture. Now, the metering, while I'm still on metering, we'll keep on chatting about it. I'll just take the lens off. It's a 50mm f1.8, which is most probably how the kit would have come out. If I just pick up the mirror very, very carefully here, hopefully you'll be able to see this. If I twist it so there's maybe a bit of light on there, you'll actually see, I'll come around this other way, it might be easiest. You might actually be able to see that underneath the mirror is a second little mirror that drops down. And while the mirror is actually in the downward position, that mirror underneath then reflects the light coming in from the lens onto a little sensor. And when the shutter is depressed, the mirror flips up, the little mirror in the middle then flips up underneath the main mirror, and the camera actually reads the metering off the film itself during exposure. And you might be able to see, again, I'll just lift it up, oops, in there, in the first curtain, I don't know if you can see it, first curtain there is a matrix, which basically is the same reflectance as most popular films. So the camera's keeping an eye on what's going on all of the time. In the program setting, it doesn't use off the film metering, but in the aperture preferred setting, it does. Okay, what else is there to like about the OM-40? I like this camera a lot, by the way, while we're talking. It's easy to use, it's comfortable in the hand, it is rather intuitive like most of the OM series. Set it onto manual just for the heck of it. Around here we have DX coding, and like the XA series, you can either have DX coding from 25 ISO through to 3200 ISO, or if you take it off there, you've actually got the opportunity to be able to manually change your ISO just by picking up the ring and then twisting it. I'm not too sure what I'm on now, who knows. And while you're actually in this mode, you can take advantage of plus or minus 2 stops of exposure if you wish, without having to guess the ISOs. I mean, you can do it anyway, but this just gives you that idea, and then that visual indication of where you're at. There's actually a plus minus in the viewfinder as well to remind you that you actually are in exposure compensation mode. And while we're still on exposure, there's a lot about exposure with this camera. There is this little button here called ESP. And no, it doesn't stand for extrasensory perception. It stands for electrosensitive pattern. Electroselective pattern, sorry. And the ESP function actually has a look at the exposure, and it sees what's in the center of the image. It also sees what's on the outside, and if there is a big difference in contrast, it will expect the center to be the subject and the center to be darker, and it will actually compensate to suit. It's quite clever. It seems to work quite well. I don't know much more about it than that, but very interesting and quite handy. In fact, I'd suggest you leave it on all the time. And there's also a little indicator to say that you've got ESP going as well. Excuse me. You would also, if you had your subject off to the edge somewhere, or one edge, then you can actually just do that compose, AE lock, compose, take your photograph, and off you go. Shutter speeds 2 seconds through to 1/1000th of a second. From 1 to 1/1000th of a second, you'll see it in the viewfinder, which is really, really handy. There is a 12-second self timer, and that's hiding here. You just pull it out. You just push it to the side, and oops, didn't lock into place. It's locked into place. There's a little red indicator to say that it's locked, and as you take the photograph, you will get mirror lockup, which is very, very handy, visual and audible indications for about 12 seconds. The last couple of seconds, about now-ish. There it goes. The last couple of seconds doesn't change with like some other cameras do. That's what I was trying to say. There on the top, you have your winder, you have your shutter button, you have your self timer, you have your DX coding, plus your exposure compensation, your ISO settings, your rewind button, you have your mode dials from battery check, and again you get that visual and audible indication, battery check, program, auto and manual modes, and you rewind. On the front, really, bar your focusing in your aperture, which is pretty standard with the Olympus, you also have your ESP function on the side, and of course right in the standard sort of OM1, OM2 type scenario, you have your shutter speeds from 1 second through to 1/1000th of a second, and a B setting as well. Underneath you have, it'll take the motor drive and the winder too, so there's the electrical connections, there is the mechanical connections. It takes two LR44, SR44 batteries. It has a tripod socket, the tripod socket's hiding there in the center, which is a much better idea, in the center of the lens there. And that's about it for the back. There is, for the front, the back has a little bit of a grip, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but it actually comes out a bit for your thumb, which is good. And it also has your film indicator window, so you know that there's a film in there, and generally most of the modern films actually have what type of film and how many exposures it is on the back, so then that's quite handy as well. Alright, the Olympus OM-40, I think I've covered most of the basic features and the feeling of the camera. I've said I like it, I do like it a lot. I'm tossing up whether I'm going to keep it or not in the Oly35mm collection. It is a very nice camera to use. It's my third favourite, fourth favourite I suppose, after the OM1, the OM4, the OM2. And then the OM-40 comes along, and it's just really nice to use. Not too heavy, 460 grams. It's quite reasonable, and it feels good in the hand. Good exposure. What do you call it? Exposure thinking. That ESP works really, really well. It's just nice. The Olympus OM-40 or OM-PC in the US. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.